There is a moment, and maybe you have had it, and you look around your life and think, how did I get here? Not in a reflective philosophical way, in the quiet, raw, quiet, terrifying way, where everything you thought you'd build is gone or crumbling or just not enough to hold you anymore. Rock bottom is not dramatic scene from a movie. For most people, it is painfully ordinary. The hardest part is not falling. It is figuring out how to take even one step after. Welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Yusuf, and this is the space where we have honest conversations about mental health that most people are afraid to start. Today's guest is a father, an Air Force veteran, and someone who has walked through loss, trauma, and serious injury and came out the other side with hard earned wisdom and a practical framework to share. Please welcome Ryan Castleberry. Ryan, I'm genuinely glad you're here.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this today.
Welcome. So, Ryan, before we get into a depth of everything, I want to start somewhere personal. So, if you had to point to one moment, not the lowest point necessarily, but the moment where something inside you shifted and said, okay, I have to try differently. What did that moment feel like for you?
So, after my motorcycle accident, and I was told that I wouldn't be able to run again, and 3 months before that, I completed an ultra marathon with no training, and so it completely left me clueless of, because that's how I defined who I was, and so I was forced to turn and just do what I could when I could. And at that point, just walking was the best that I could do, and looking back, I mean, I've made such growth from there, but it all started with just doing what you could when you could. And I think that was monumental, through the healing process.
Mm, I see. And Ryan, there's this idea most of us carry around that people who rebuild their lives have some kind of defining moment, a grand turning point where everything just clicks for them. But I get the sense from your experience was a lot less cinematic than that.
Well, so my moment was my daughter was 3 years old and sitting in the back of my car, back of our vehicle. And I was in the process of losing everything, trying to recover, trying to heal, and she wanted french fries from McDonald's. I couldn't afford to buy her $2 french fries, and I remember sitting there having that moment and just gut-wrenching hearing her cries because I couldn't, provide something simple for her, and just having that moment where I decided I would never be back in that moment ever again. Little did I know that that would be the same thing that would cause, you know, the the separation between the 2 of us, um, as she felt that, that I chose work and things like that over her when m in my eyes, I was, choosing to provide and do what I felt a father should do, so
Mm. And when you were in it, like, did you even recognize it as your rock bottom at the time, or is that something you named later when you look back at it?
uh, that moment was definitely, like, gut-wrenching and definitely, like, right in your face, you felt it, you knew it,
Yeah.
and I remember getting home and just sitting in my own self, in my own skin and just, having that internal dialogue with yourself of, "I don't wanna be here, and I don't want this to ever happen again," and, you know, I knew from there, things had to change.
Yeah. You've talked about failure, about losing relationships, about financial movements that were genuinely heart wrenching, including not being able to afford something as small as French fries for your daughter. I want to sit with that for a moment, because underneath those external circumstances, there's something that happens internally. To identify, to self worth, to the story we tell ourselves about who we are. How do you think was really being broken down in you during those years beneath the surface?
Well, so I believe that, we're a growth in process, and it's life is a journey, not a destination. Um, and I remember pushing away someone I loved very much and then realizing she was gone. There was no coming back. And just having that moment of knowing I never wanted to be in that situation ever again. I'd pushed away the people I loved, and, it was because I didn't wanna hurt them from a brain injury and, how I was showing up in life. But it was that moment where I realized it was my turn to grow and to step up, and that's actually when I jumped deep into, therapy, and, I found a therapist that, man, he spoke my language, and he would tell me things I didn't wanna hear, and he would say it in a way I didn't wanna hear it, but he had a way of saying it, and it was okay to come from him, and that's where the real work started for me.
I see. And for fathers specifically, is there something about failing while also being responsible for a child, that adds a particular kind of weight to all of this?
The well, as a father and just as a parent in general, I think, our biggest desire is for our children to not feel, you know, the pain and the struggles that we felt. And, I felt like it became my responsibility to pass my lessons on to my daughter because that's the only way she's ever going to avoid the struggles and the pains that, I experienced. It's by having the knowledge and the tools that I didn't have, going into my situations.
I see. Let's talk about rebuilding, like what rebuilding actually look like in everyday life. What did those early days of trying to do something different actually feel like? Because I think people imagine it as this forward momentum, but I suspect it was a lot messier than that.
Absolutely. So I spent 6 weeks in a brain injury rehab. And before that, I was actually a fitness trainer, extremely fit, extremely healthy. And every day I would give that, my therapist just grief, give me something hard, and one day she's like, I got something special for you today. And next thing I know, she got me standing on one leg, you know, stretched out. Man, my legs are quivering, every part of me wanting to break down. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And she's like, oh, that's Pilates. I do it 5 days a week. And Pilates is nothing I'd ever experienced before. The hard part was I didn't always show up the way I wish I could have. You know, I caused pain and hurt to a lot of people that I loved. And it got to a point where I realized, that the people I love and care about are worth better than what I've been showing. And that's where the real work came, where I had to stop using excuses, and start making changes. And that's, you know, where it got ugly and it wasn't very pretty and it was painful and a lot of self-reflection, and it's not always it's not always the fun part, but getting through it, you know, has created a more peaceful me, and I'm thankful that I've put that work in.
Mm. Uh, you know, people feel or just assume that, once you start doing things, it'll be in a straight path, like it'll be happy, 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 forward, forward, forward. From your experience, what was it like actually? Was there setbacks, again hitting, losses, a few setbacks, then again pushing?
Well, so, like, I know when I was going through therapy, all the time felt like everything that was wrong with me, and it had become such a heavy, like, here you are trying to change, you're trying to be a better person, but the rest of the world still sucks. Yeah. You're like, I'm putting in the work and they're not. And why am I feeling all the pain? Um, and then it dawned on me one day, you know, everything that I've been looking at that's wrong with me is also what's right with me. Those bad traits, like somebody, say somebody who's addicted to drugs or bad choices, if they dig deeper, those same features are what make wonderful entrepreneurs, and it's just a matter of how we frame it, and what we direct it towards, whether we define it as bad or good. But, so even everything that's wrong with you is also what's right with you. And that's what I had to realize, to make it not so heavy going through the process.
I see. And you developed something you called the 30-day climb, a framework built around small, consistent action. Can you explain what is that?
So, like we want to change in our life, and people come up with these diets, these fitness plans, and we jump in for 3 days, and after 3 days we're like, I don't want to do this anymore, and people actually following through with it is usually, you know, it's very low percentage. And what I found was it's not trying to get everything done and, eh, you know, everything all one day. Fitness isn't all in one workout. It's consistent, each day. If you're trying to get, fit and healthy, just start showing up to the gym. Your workouts are going to start to increase, when it comes to nutrition and diet. Instead of going on that crash diet, just try to make a better choice at each meal. And over time, it becomes more of a life, a life choice and not feeling forced. And that's made it way more, digestible for me. And I look at my life now compared to what it was, 10, 20 years ago, and I'm much happier with the just making small choices to get in the right direction.
Mhm. Ryan, for people who want to connect with you or just want to learn more about your work, where can you do that?
So RyanCastleberry.com, and I also just recently published a book.
Wow, perfect. Do you have any links for that, like your social media, your LinkedIn, etc.?
Yeah, so my LinkedIn is the Castleberry team, and and then of course RyanCastleberry.com, will give you access to everything as well. And of course, I'm on every other, platform you can think of.
Perfect. And to everyone listening, all these links are in the show notes, so just go and check those out.
Wonderful.
Ryan, is there any last message that you want to leave us with?
No, it's just it comes down to one step, one foot in front of the other. Small choices and you know, consecutive steps. Just keep pushing, and over time, life goes in the direction that you're shooting for.
Hmm. Doug, Ryan, thank you so much for coming and genuinely for the honesty, for the vulnerability, and for showing up and making this the kind of conversation that I think a lot of people needed today.
Wonderful, and thank you for letting me be a part. And hopefully, we can do this again sometime.
Yes, of course. And to everyone listening, if something in today's episode landed with you, share it with someone who might need it. You never know who is quietly waiting for a conversation like this to find them. This has been Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I am Yusuf. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you in the next one.